So today, end of July here, we welcome you for our Educator Wellness Coffee Connect, and we're excited to share some different resources around educator wellness today. I'm Jill Gunther, one of the social emotional behavioral learning specialists moving in to regional support lead for this next school year, supporting ESUs 2, 3, and then OPS. And I'll let Mackenzie introduce herself.
Hey everyone, I'm Mackenzie Rydell. I was previously a social emotional behavior learning specialist, but moving on August 1st, I will be an integrated support specialist, still serving Region 1, which includes ESUs 4, 5, 6, and also LPS.
Awesome. Thank you, Mackenzie. On that slide, we also have contact information for the rest of our regional team as well. So if you're looking to reach out to anybody across the state, you can click on that link there with our contact information and names for those supporting across the state. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with our welcoming inclusion activity. We actually have a quick little video that we're going to share. So as you're watching this video, just kind of think about what stands out to you. We'll ask you you can reflect in the chat, you can unmute and share out, but just thinking about it in terms of your professional life and just kind of how you relate to it. So we'll go ahead and play that little video for you.
Oh, this is hot.
Can you hear me? Loud and clear?
Hello, Annie. So, Wes, I know you've been my boss for a couple of years now. You have been a really great mentor to me, and I really appreciate that.
So I just want to thank you for being a great dad. You're always there to support me, even when I say, no, I don't really need this talk right now, but you're there nevertheless, and it's always just great to have someone to rely on.
For the past 12 years, you've been my best friend, and I want to thank you for everything you've done for me.
You've always been there for me, my number one friend. I think we both know that this is going to go a lot farther than school.
Although I know we've only been married for a year and a half, I know I don't always acknowledge how awesome you are.
You have a great sense of humor. You're witty and sharp.
You're a kind person and always thoughtful of others.
You're one of the sweetest, kindest, most thoughtful men and people in my life, and I really appreciate that.
And the whole time you were growing up, you made it so easy to be a mom. And I don't know if I've ever told you that.
You are absolutely beautiful, absolutely, and you are so, so talented. Keep doing what you're doing because it is going to take you places.
Do we switch spots? Is that what we do?
Jackson.
Yes. I'm so lucky that you're in my life today as not only a coworker, but as a friend. You're someone that inspires me every day just to keep a positive attitude and to laugh and smile and stay lighthearted.
I always really appreciate how you start singing at the drop of a hat because you have such a beautiful voice, and I love the way that you filled my whole childhood with song.
First met you 12 years ago in kindergarten, and I'm so glad I did because you've been my best friend ever since. It's the best, so thanks.
The compliment I want to give you today that I've never said to you before is your awareness of other people and how nice you are to everyone in the room.
You're very good at making everyone in a room smile, putting everyone at ease. I admire that so much in you.
You're honestly such an amazing person. You are my best friend in the world, and you always will be. All I can say is that I really love you, and I don't know, it might be hard for you to believe because I don't act like it sometimes, but I do.
I like to say that I take after you because I think that you're just such a great person, and I aspire to be more like you as an adult. And I think that if I could be just like my mom, that would be the greatest gift I could have.
You're the most beautiful woman I know. I'm so blessed to have you in my life. I probably don't tell you that enough. Yeah.
Super cake, subscribe.
All right. So just kind of a nice little heartwarming video to start us off today. It's really nice to just kind of watch that. I know for me, I can't stop smiling even while listening to the compliments that the family members are sharing with each other, that the friends are sharing with each other, that the colleagues are sharing with each other. Just like the video says, just some amazing compliments. And a lot of times, if you noticed, those that were giving and receiving the compliments really couldn't stop smiling. I feel like we obviously don't do that enough to kind of sharing those compliments and building those relationships up in that way. And a lot of times when we're getting a compliment, we don't necessarily know how to react to that compliment or kind of like what to say as well. So just like a very interesting video. Any other comments on the video as well, Mackenzie or anybody else? All right, so this brings us to our Padlet. So just a reminder, we are still using that same Padlet with some of those general resources. We have some resources around educator wellness and then all of the links that we share throughout our time together today in there as well. And then also links to our previous Coffee Connects, which are also located in our media library. The password for that is at capital MTSS. All right, so educator wellness is our topic of conversation today. Love this quote. It says, if we hire great teachers but do not create environments to retain them, we will continue to fight a losing battle. So very true, really thinking about that burnout, that burnout and continuing to overwork and kind of overcommit. It doesn't help us build those better teachers, but really thinking about how we can take care of the teachers that we have. That wellness really helps support that. We have our skills web. So if you've been with us before, you probably recognize this skills web here. We have those 5 skill areas. So self-awareness, self-management, problem solving, relationships, and then a pro-social behavior. So as we share throughout our time together today, really thinking about through the lens of some of those skills and how we can really build up those skills for our educators so that we can in turn really model those skills for our students. And we also want to be thinking about that in terms of our building our system. And so through the lens also of those 4 essential elements. So layered continuum of support, database decision making, infrastructure and shared leadership, and then communication and collaboration. So for the topic of educator wellness, really thinking about how are we layering on those supports for our educators? What data do we have? We'll talk about a couple pieces of that, but what data do we have to kind of make those decisions? And then really, how are we engaging in shared leadership? How are we engaging in really building those systems of strong communication and collaboration? So we've kind of divided up our content today kind of by these big kind of key ideas or key categories. And so the first one here, fostering a supportive school culture, really ties into a lot of those essential elements there, but thinking about like how do we foster that culture of wellness in our building? How are we kind of building that up? And these are just some great kind of think abouts here. So, thinking about how we are encouraging that open communication, that helps us build that positive culture. Really working to create that environment for our staff to feel comfortable, sharing concerns, seeking out support, asking questions, kind of collaborating with each other. which goes into that second one, really promoting that environment of collaboration. How are we providing that time for teachers to work together, to problem solve together, to be able to share ideas and resources, what they have going on in their classroom, maybe what things are coming up for them that they want to problem solve around within their classroom. So really promoting that idea of how are we bringing our teams together, bringing our staff together to promote collaboration. How we're recognizing and appreciating efforts. And that can look different for different individuals, how we want to be acknowledged or how we want to celebrate some of those small wins, big wins, the hard work that's going on in our building each and every day. How we're building strong relationships. So, really building those relationships not only between our staff, but also staff to student within the district level as well. So, really promoting and nurturing those connections for all stakeholders, and really just really making that sense of community or building that sense of community as well. The next one, really involving teachers in decision making. We'll talk a little bit about fair process here, because we know that when teachers feel seen, when they feel heard, they feel that they have a voice at the table, that they're more likely to be invested in the work that they're doing. And then lastly, prioritizing mental health. So we have a couple resources around mindfulness and how we might be able to kind of incorporate that. But really promoting that mindfulness, or maybe it's stress management strategies, maybe it's just identifying and establishing your own boundaries. So thinking about those work versus home boundaries as well. So, all great things to think about in terms of how we're really building that positive and supportive climate, culture, and community. This is a great resource here. It is LinkedIn, where you see that social emotional well-being for educators. But just a great visual representation here. It comes from the Center for Learning and Wellbeing Framework on educator well-being. But we really like how it defined some of those different categories there. And then we kind of tried to match them up with those SEB skills areas. So that skills star, the social emotional behavioral learning skills star that we saw a couple slides ago, kind of matching them up with the areas here. So you'll see like be reflective and really thinking about how that aligns with our skill area of self-awareness. Um, and then they go in to really explore, what does it mean? What does it look like to be reflective? How do we define that? But then on the flip side, how is it also relevant to social emotional well-being? So just a nice resource here that really goes through what it means, so defining it, what it looks like, and then also why is it relevant? So we encourage you to check that out, and just giving that reminder that, it's important to remember that we really can't, you guys, again, have probably heard this before, but we can't just tell our staff or tell our educators that, yeah, we need to show that appreciation, or we maybe need to write on our shout out wall that we have in the staff lounge. We really have to model and show those things as well to really build that system, where everybody feels comfortable doing those things and they're motivated to show that appreciation, or provide those shout outs. So, really thinking about that modeling piece as well. The other thing I want to mention here is there is a book, the Social Emotional Well-Being book, that is just provides some really great examples about how to embed these types of things into our system. And really first starting with that defining what it looks like and sounds like, but also taking that moment to reflect on what does it currently look like and sound like in terms of educator wellness or educator well-being in our building, and what are some areas that we can really work to build upon. So another great resource there. Staff acknowledgement. So I would encourage you to also think about what does this look like in our building or in your district. So staff acknowledgement can be so many different things. It can be done in so many different ways. So maybe it's staff meetings. We're sharing out some of those small wins or staff wins or even team wins for that matter. Maybe it's implementing a peer recognition program. Maybe it's how we're celebrating these things on our social media. Celebrating, giving shout outs to some different employee efforts. Maybe it's notes of encouragement and exploring how we can do that. Maybe it's just creating opportunities for students to acknowledge staff members. Maybe it's notes, maybe it's something that they're sharing out at a staff meeting, or maybe it's a recording, but getting creative with what that could look like as well. Maybe it's allowing staff members to showcase their knowledge and being able to really share their passion, their knowledge with others during maybe professional learning, during a staff meeting. But that can be a way that we can show that staff acknowledgement as well. And I would also just really like to highlight that last bullet there is not forgetting to ask staff what their preference is. How would they like to be acknowledged? And then really taking that into consideration as well, because everybody kind of has their own way that they like to be acknowledged. Some of us don't like those, call outs or those shout outs maybe during a staff meeting or on social media. Maybe we like to have more of those private acknowledgments or shout outs. So definitely something to consider. Maybe it's a staff survey, but really gaining that feedback, that information from staff of what their preferences are. This next slide has tons of great resources. Just wanted to highlight especially a couple of these. That first one comes from St. Paul Schools in Minnesota, and it is a jam-packed resource just all around recognition. They call it a recognition toolkit, but tons of resources, tons of ideas. Mackenzie just pulled it up there. But so many pages of some different things that you could either get ideas from, steal some of those ideas, but a great resource there. One of the other ones I wanted to mention was the NPBIS rewards for adults in the building. Another great resource. It's 35 free or inexpensive rewards for adults in the building. And I really feel like this one just kind of helps us kind of think outside the box. Some of them are maybe things that we wouldn't think about, but others are like, oh, yeah, we could do that for our adults. As some of that recognition as well. So some fun ones, some funny ones, and some just kind of outside of the box thinking ones. So definitely something to check out there as well. The other ones also great. You may have others that you want to share. You can certainly add them to the Padlet so others have access to those around staff acknowledgement as well. But we have like a Nebraska MTSS Care and Connection Google form that could be used as a template. It's something that we've done within our team just to kind of allow each of our team members to share some of their favorites, some of their interests, so that if we did want to send them just, a little small appreciation or maybe a card or a note or a gift card or whatever that might be, we had all of that information from all of our coworkers because we are kind of scattered across the state. So just a nice way to do that. I would also encourage you to take a look at some of the other ones. Lots of great ideas, some in terms of just kind of that recognition for others. So wanted to share that with you guys. One of the other pieces, and we do have a video that we can drop the link in the chat as well. It's also in our Padlet. But really thinking about the difference between appreciation versus affirmation. And really thinking about what those differences are. So if we think about appreciation, it's really acknowledging someone for what they do. So an example could sound like, hey, Jill, thanks for sending that calendar invite. Whereas the affirmation is really acknowledging someone for who they are. So that might sound like, hey, Jill, thanks for sending that calendar invite. It keeps things running smoothly and ensures we all know when meetings are happening. So, really thinking about those differences between that appreciation and that affirmation, because that appreciation kind of happens, it's fleeting, right? And sometimes we just say it because we feel like we have to say it, and it almost becomes meaningless. Like, hey, you did these things. Thanks for doing those things. I appreciate your work. In the video, they talk a little bit about how. It's really tough when, corporations or even maybe thinking about administrators get up and say, hey, yes, I really appreciate all of your hard work. Now, while that's nice and we appreciate kind of that call out or that shout out, really thinking about how much more meaningful it can be if we think about it in terms of that affirmation. It lasts with us longer. We're making it more meaningful by really adding those specific details. We think about it in terms of how we think about recognizing our students as well. Okay, so same thing for adults. Not easily forgotten when we're really including those pieces for an affirmation, and it really helps to reinforce our staff, our coworkers to continue to really show up and want to show up and want to collaborate. So, thinking about those differences. Uh, in the video, which is linked here on this slide, they have an exit ticket activity. So in the video, they have like 4 different great activities. I think the exit ticket one, I want to say it's the third one that they talk about. But the activity that they have here is pairing up with 3 different people and then exchanging those affirmations. So in the way that you're doing the exit ticket, everybody would get and everybody would receive those affirmations. But the key here is you only have 3 ways that you can respond. So the 3 ways that you're able to respond is with a simple thank you, with a thank you, I really liked hearing that. Can you tell me more? Or the third way, or the third option is thank you. I really liked hearing that. Can you put that in a letter and give it to my boss? Okay. And the idea here is a lot of times we get, an affirmation, but we downplay it, right? We downplay the compliment or we downplay the affirmation. Like, oh no, like worked with my team and they were a huge part of that. Or if we get the compliment, like, hey, I really like your outfit, we're like, oh, this old thing, like I've had this for years. And so really only having those 3 choices to respond to where we can really just focus on that affirmation that was given to us. So just a really fun activity, something to think about how you might incorporate that into your building as well. The other activities also great. Like I said, I think there's 4 of them in the video that's linked in the slide, but all great activities. The next piece here, so if you think back to when we were going through the different ideas to foster that community or foster that positive climate culture, one of them was involving teachers in decision making. So, and that reminder that when teachers feel heard, when they feel valued, when they have a voice at the table, that they feel more invested in their work. So we wanted to mention fair process and really thinking about that idea of what fair process is and how it really does mean that we're engaging all of those that would be impacted or all of those that would be affected in the process at hand. So there's 3 kind of pieces of fair process. It's the 3 E's there. So engagement, explanation, and then expectation clarity. So engagement, we define that is really inviting the voices to the table. Okay, not just asking, but really bringing voices to the table to allow to share. Explanation, that second one there. So really sharing the who, the how, the why behind the decision being made. So really sharing those details of that. So that explanation. And then the last one there, expectation clarity, is really helping people understand what's expected moving forward. There's a great article that we also have linked in the slide. It's fair process comparison article. Lots of great information. Does a nice job really digging into each of those three E's. But I think the important piece that I want to point out is when we think about fair process, it really helps guide how decisions are made, kind of what that looks like. And each of those three parts really help people have a better understanding. They feel better about the decisions being made. Not because necessarily maybe it goes their way, because we're never going to please everybody, right, with the decision that's being made. So it's not necessarily that, but it's really because they had a voice at the table. They have that understanding or that explanation behind the decision being made. And it's truly, when we think about fair process, really about that inclusion, really about that transparency. And so oftentimes in our schools, in our businesses, we really miss some of those steps and really thinking about the pieces of fair process, not because we want to do things to people, and not because we don't care, but because we're often making so many decisions at a very fast rate, right? And a lot of times when we think about hierarchy or kind of like top-down decision making, it runs deep. And so I would encourage you to read that article. It's a great article on fair process and really reflecting on what does this look like in our building? How might we bring in this engagement, explanation, expectation, clarity? All right. One of the other ones here, again, around building that community, building that positive climate and culture, was prioritizing mental health, and really promoting and reinforcing our employee assistance programs and access to those programs, and how we might be engaging staff in either mindfulness, maybe some stress management strategies, or just really identifying and establishing boundaries. So, we do have a first five link on there. That is actually where that first compliments video came from as well. I forgot to mention that. But a great way to really kind of work to prioritize that mental health and in big picture, really building that community. So we share about the three inclusive practices and how some of the different activities within first five could really be incorporated to build that sense of community, to build that positive climate and culture. So just an example there of a gratitude rainbow linked in. We also define when we think about mindfulness, what it is, and really just being present, right? Focusing on the moment at hand, and then really addressing it with some kindness and curiosity. So, Breathe for Change is a great resource as well. That is linked in. They have a ton of 3-minute mindful moments within their resource library. So, their resource library has lots of different things available, but we wanted to point out that one for sure. And then we also have a mindfulness and education brief from UNL. Some of the GRAs worked on putting that together, but lots of great information around mindfulness, really defining that, how it might be incorporated within our buildings. So I would encourage you to check that out as well.
All right, so I will talk through the next two components, and then we'll wrap it up for today. So the next area we'll want to talk about is supporting professional development and growth. And so what that can look like is offering mentorship programs. This is good for obviously new staff who are fresh out of school or transitioning into teaching, that can really learn and grow with that relationship from a veteran staff, but also thinking of it in terms of staff who have gotten a new assignment. Maybe they're switching from teaching kindergarten to teaching 5th grade. That's a big change. But thinking about those mentorships and really creating that connection among staff members, and that collaboration among staff members too. And then thinking about providing opportunities for professional growth, whether it's through workshops or training on topics related to their profession, specifically related to what they're teaching, but also related to some of that wellness knowledge around stress management, work-life balance, self-care techniques, things like that. So kind of giving a broad spectrum of that content specific to what they're teaching, but also content specific to them as a person, as a human being working in a school. And then the last area we'll touch on is incorporating wellness into professional development. So this could look a lot of different ways, providing relevant breaks to stretch, breaks to walk, to think, things like that are always good during professional development. Providing connection opportunities, whether it's through welcoming activities, through kind of those engagement, relate breaks throughout the professional development, maybe doing some grounding or mindfulness, and also providing snacks. I know we love when snacks come to professional development opportunities. So thinking of how you, yes, provide that professional development, but also how do you incorporate wellness and connection into those. There's a link down below. So you might have caught on to Jill. A lot of what she was talking about is system related. And if you've come to any of our previous Educator Wellness Coffee Connects, you've often heard like you can't self-care your way out of a system that doesn't support wellness. And so this topic, or the resource down below, talks about educator wellness in 3 different sections. It talks about individual wellness and well-being, or personal well-being, and then it talks about organizational well-being. So as a system, how are you creating a system and creating those micro shifts to really contribute to a system that supports and upholds boundaries, that creates connection and belonging, that really has that positive climate. And then it also talks about its 3rd component of educator well-being is really that professional quality of life. So thinking about compassion, satisfaction, or compassion fatigue and burnout. So you can go check that out. We'll dive a little bit more into mentoring. Mentoring, like I mentioned before, is great for new staff, great for staff switching assignments. This is a project that we have in Nebraska. If you haven't heard of it, it's called Get Set. And it really aims to help support and mentor special education teachers and keep those educators in the field across the career continuum. So at every level of experience, whether it's new special education staff or experienced. And the goals is to reduce that special education teacher reported stress, increase job satisfaction, and also improve that self-efficacy of administrators in supporting special education teachers, as well as enhancing special education teacher skills and confidence in their profession. And like I mentioned before, although this is specific to special education, it's really important to think about how in your districts you have mentoring programs to help support educators across the entire level of experience. So we're going to touch on professional development a little bit more. As I mentioned before, as a district, you really want to provide employees with training relevant to their job tasks or their content that they're teaching. And when we're providing professional development, we want to be intentional with what's being provided and really shift from that one and done professional development mindset to thinking of professional development as an ongoing thing for growth. So as we're providing PD, instead of just having people go to a training and then come back and go to their everyday, what they've been doing, you might think about being a little bit more intentional with a couple of examples here. So before sending or going to a professional development, you might identify your clear purpose for going, desired outcomes for why you're going, and then create some goals for what you want to get out of the training, or maybe what you might want to change, anticipating what you might get from the training or the professional development. And then during the PD, being an active participant, taking notes, collaborating, sharing ideas, really being fully present in learning. I know it's really hard as an educator. There's so many things to do, but just being more present will really take the professional development a lot further and will lead to more self-efficacy when it comes to doing changes, doing new curriculum, all the things that you're getting trained on, implementing that into your classroom or your educational environment. And then after the professional development, we want to create a space to plan and reflect for next steps, talk about what you learned, your key takeaways with your colleagues, commit to a change that you might want to make, and then thinking about how are you going to measure the impact it's making, and when are you going to come together to reflect on the steps that you've made together. So instead of just going to a training and leaving and going back to the everyday life, thinking about it a little bit more intentionally with that before, during, and after action steps. So Learning Forward is a great organization. They have a conference every year and they sent out an example. This is specific to a conference, but same idea before attending the conference, during the conference, and after the conference. So a great example to look at if you're wanting to implement something like this. And then I also wanted to give a shout out to our Competency Drivers Staff Support webinar that we recorded about a year ago. And it really dives into professional development as a continuous ongoing process versus that training is kind of a one and done. And then also how to incorporate coaching after professional development to really maximize that learning. 3 inclusive practices are a great way to incorporate into your professional development, but also build on that culture of care that you're wanting to build and connection in your districts. So thinking about how you're creating and fostering a supportive environment, establishing that safety, predictability, and connection intentionally and explicitly building this out of your habits. And then also promoting those social emotional skills for, yes, students, but also for adults. So we have our one pager here that just dives into each of those inclusive practices, which are welcoming activities, engaging practices, and optimistic closures. And that last area is addressing specific needs for concern. So things that we might look through here is gathering feedback and data. So using surveys, focus groups, interviews, all of the things to collect some hard data and also perceptual data to understand really what are educators' needs and concerns in our district. That way we're making sure that the efforts we're going to do are based on data and driven by data. And then hopefully we're going to progress monitor and collect data to see how what we're doing is making an impact or is it not? And then we need to shift our focus. One example of a survey that could be used is that NDE perceptual survey. You can find it on their website. It's also linked in the Padlet. But also understanding that we don't want to just do surveys, but we really want to be intentional about what survey we're picking and how we're going to use that information intentionally to gauge the plan of action. The next area is providing support for student discipline. So we know that student behaviors really do impact teacher well-being, and providing support and resources to address these challenges can in turn lead to more employee satisfaction and less stress and burnout from the employer perspective. And then offering solutions for administrative burdens. So thinking administrators are busy, they have a lot of responsibility, a lot of things to get done. So how can you streamline paperwork or other administrative tasks to reduce your workload and your stress? We're going to dive a little into restorative practices. We decided to put restorative practices into this last section, but we know that of all the categories we've talked about today, it really does kind of like underlie all of that employee wellness. But when we hear restorative practices, we often think of discipline, and we want to think of restorative practices as, yes, a way to address and shift how we discipline, but also as a way to create connection and being a preventative measure to some of those discipline incidents or staff conflict. And it really does support that community building and relationship within an environment. So that's why we stuck it in this area. So let's dive a little bit further into what restorative practices is. So circle up. If you've heard of restorative practices, you probably think of circles. It is a really key integral piece of restorative practices, but thinking about how if we want to shift the culture and the climate of our buildings, we have to design our gatherings for the kind of connections that we want to create. So thinking of intentionality, we got to really shift what we're doing and why we're doing it to get different results. We can't do the same thing and expect different results. We have to be intentional and shift. So what is restorative practices? Restorative practices is a comprehensive approach to supporting connection and community in building schools and established structures to repair harm. When implemented systematically, this approach has been found to reduce violence, unwanted behavior, and bullying, and to increase restoration of relationships. When implemented within a multi-tiered structure like MTSS, it significantly improves school culture and decreases the use of exclusionary discipline practices. So those highlighted words really touching on that comprehensive approach. We'll talk a little bit about the continuum of restorative practices, but realizing it's not just that reactive or responsive when things go wrong, but really that preventative side as well. And thinking of prevention, we're really trying to prevent things from happening by creating really strong community and connection among everyone involved. And then thinking systematically, it's more likely to be sustained if we're implementing these new practices within our system. And then that leads to really sustainable, significant improvements in our school culture. So restorative practices is an emerging social science, but the research is hot and heavy and things are coming out pretty quickly. And so thinking about how can we incorporate these practices into our everyday, not only for our students, but also for our staff. So here is the restorative practices continuum. As I've said multiple times, it is that comprehensive, preventative, and responsive system. Thinking of 80% prevention. So we're wanting to spend a lot of time on doing those preventative community building and connection, and then 20% responsive. So thinking how are we responding when things are happening, but also recognizing we have to put a lot of effort into that building of community because it's hard to repair harm when you don't feel like you belong. And this fits perfectly within our MTSS triangle, thinking of that 80% prevention. This is our core practices that we're doing with all students and all staff. And then thinking of those responding to harm practices being those more tier 3 intensified practices. And at the base, we're wanting to change our language and change how we gather through circles, through using affective language and questions, and then changing the way we respond to harm from shifting from doing like punishment and what's the rule to be that was broken and what is the consequence to how are we coming together to have conversation and to repair harm. Just a few quotes here. There has been some research around restorative practices in the workplace, and this is a great quote by Ted Watchell. Human beings are happier, more cooperative and productive, and more likely to make positive changes in their behavior when those in positions of authority do things with them rather than to them or for them. And I feel like everyone has been in a situation when something has been done to them or for them, and they can recognize how that feels icky or it doesn't feel great. But thinking about how are we doing things with people how are we holding those high expectations, but also honoring that connection and trust and care and nurture and support. So this quote really gets at one of those restorative practices theories called the social discipline window. We're not going to dive too really into that at all today, but just know that we're wanting to do with those high expectations and high nurture and support. And also thinking of research proves that people learn best and flourish when our relationships are strong. The reciprocity felt working with others creates feelings of value and belonging that lead to job satisfaction and are linked to employee retention. So in our schools, how are we creating environments that really foster that connection in those relationships and that collaboration working with others? And how are we creating that as a norm in our building and not just something that happens out of the blue or because one person asks? How are we creating that being like the way that we do things? How are we collaborating consistently and regularly? How are we supporting educators through restorative practices? When we implement these practices with adults and with staff, we're creating safe spaces for dialogue and support to share experiences, to problem solve, to feel that our voice is heard and that we have a part in the overall bigger system that we are a part of. We're encouraging relational teaching by building stronger relationships through that open dialogue, empathy, mutual respect. Restorative practices encourage teachers to build stronger relationships with students through dialogue and also with among their colleagues, with their other staff members. And then thinking of that whole school approach where all students and educators feel supported through school policy and culture, which we'll talk a little bit about. Thinking of changing our systems, making those micro shifts. If we implement it into our policy, it's more likely to make a bigger impact. We talked about circles briefly, gathering together, having that open dialogue, creating that safe space for connection, and also some harder conversations. These are just a couple resources. That green one is a script. So it's blank and you could fill it in to create a script for your staff meeting. There's an example from Allie Hearn, Coaching and Consulting, with community building circle with your staff. And then that right example, I was going to click, but I think we're running out of time. It's an example from the Minnesota Department of Education, and it has a bunch of ideas for how you could incorporate circles with adults in your educational environment. So one that I really liked was thinking about creating a community of practice circle where it'd be kind of like a collaborative meeting, talking about your upcoming unit, maybe questions you have, ideas, and then working through it then, but in a circle format. So kind of shifting what we're doing to a little bit different of a structure, but still having that rich conversation and planning. I'm not going to play the video, but it is in our Padlet, and we are only going to play a snippet of it, but if you have a little extra time, I would really recommend watching the whole thing. Laura Mumin, she has restorative PBIS, and she talks about using restorative practices as a well-being initiatives in schools, thinking about how you can lessen teacher stress through use of restorative practices. So a great video. I would recommend watching it after.
And restorative.
Okay, and then this last little bit is leveraging artificial intelligence. So thinking about that educator administrator workload and how can you kind of take some of that burden off. Obviously thinking about what you have to do and what you like to do, and then thinking about how can you kind of mesh those so you're doing what you have to do, but maybe more efficiently. Andrew Easton, he's great, from Nebraska. He does the ESU CC Good Life podcast. So if you're a podcaster, I would recommend watching some of his videos. But he just talked about how can you leverage AI to make your life easier, maybe shorten some of your processes that you're doing, or just work smarter, not harder, essentially. So one example that was shared during a session he gave at Administrator Days was using AI to help with your evaluations, your teacher staff evaluations. And one administrator said that his eval went from about like an hour and a half per staff member to 20 minutes because he was able to go in, do the evaluation, put all of the information into AI, and then asked for it to provide strengths and areas for growth and action steps. And it was a lot quicker, and it also led to more meaningful conversations because the teachers felt they had actionable steps moving forward. So thinking about how you can do that, using AI to summarize feedback, you can use it to translate handouts, but keeping that formatting, identify themes in long documents. So one example was just putting all of this stuff from a PD you went in and then having it give you like key points. Suggesting edits and policies and procedures. He showed an example for how you can put an old policy and then some like best practice organizations that have some of those best practices in that certain area, and then asking it to take your current policy and the best practice and identify areas you might want to improve, and then creating images. So there's a lot of things you can do with AI, but if you haven't thought of how you might be able to use it to make that workload less, I would encourage you to dive into that resource linked below, or even watch some of Andrew Easton's podcasts. But at the end of the day, we're really thinking about creating that comprehensive culture of care. So we talked of a lot of different things. A lot of it was system-based, but thinking about what micro shifts can you have that shift just a little practice from what you're already doing to just a little bit more different or more intentional. So it doesn't feel like you're trying to overhaul the entire system. You're just making small changes here and there that add up over time to create impact. So burnout thrives in isolation, but healing happens in the community. So how are we going to create that community and that culture of care? So check in on your colleagues, ask how they're really doing, have those meaningful conversations, celebrate balance. Don't celebrate everyone who stays late or works so much overtime, but celebrate the teachers who model self-care, who set those boundaries, and then push for that systemic change. How can we advocate for professional development that focuses on teacher wellness, not just on student outcomes? How can we create those systematic changes that really holds the educator's wellness at the top and not just that overworking? So in 2025-26 school year, let's commit to building a culture where teachers feel supported, not just by administrators, but also by each other. And don't let it happen, make it happen. Thinking about changes that we make, especially if you're thinking about implementing some of these restorative practices, every change we're going to make is more sustainable if we're incorporating it within our existing systems, within an MTSS framework. So thinking your data, what data do you have, whether it's process data or progress data to support decision-making and implementation or changes. What systems are you using, training and supporting staff on new things, and then practices. How are you changing your language or your gathering, or how you're responding to harm when it's done? So thinking about those data, those systems and practices, and as we make changes, we want to really embed it into our systems because it will be more sustainable and last longer over time. So thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. We hope you got some good information out of this. We would appreciate any feedback. So if you can take the exit survey, we would love to hear your thoughts so we can change and improve our Coffee Connects for this coming year. Speaking of next year, we have shifted our Coffee Connects. They're going to be 1 hour from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock Central Time, and we're doing 4 this year. So we're shifting to seasonal instead of monthly. So our first seasonal Coffee Connect will be November 19th. It will be our fall Coffee Connect, and it will be talking about restorative practices a little bit more. So diving a little bit deeper into those restorative practices. And then throughout the year, we will talk about different topics, but kind of that underlying theme of that restorative practices, connection, and community within different practices. So we encourage you to register, save the dates for this coming year, and we look forward to seeing you. We also have our training events put out for the entire year next year. So thinking of those tier 1, tier 2 trainings that we've done, we're also adding an FBA, functional behavioral assessment, and behavior intervention plan training that will be in May. All of these are virtual and free, so they're on Zoom, and we would love for you to join us. So as we start this new school year, we just want to end with this optimistic closure with a reflection, A, B, C, D. So what do I do to accomplish? What do I want to accomplish this coming school year? What boundaries do I have set, and how will I uphold them? How can I spark creativity for myself and my students? And what went well last year that I want to continue to do this year? So take this, reflect on it, thinking about your new school year that you're going to start. And as always, our NeMTSS team is here to help you. If you want extra support or information, or you need some assistance with building or sustaining your MTSS system, please reach out to a member of your regional support team by finding that information on this link. Thank you so much.